What's going on, everybody? Where to even begin today? What a messy day with all the headlines going on. We're going to get started with a small snapshot here of the markets. We're going to talk about a couple of trades you could have taken today. Let's start off with ES. ES had a bit of a pullback, definitely not as much as you would expect with what's going on in the Middle East. People probably thought it was going to be a pretty bearish day, and it was it was slightly bearish, about 1.16% on the downside. From the high, we were down about 2%, I believe. Yeah, about 2%. But it did recover a decent bit of that sell-off. Now, I would say that heading into next week, this does look decently bearish, but trying to predict what's going to happen with what's going on in the Middle East right now is extremely difficult, especially going into a weekend, going into a rollover, going into a Fed meeting, going into OPEX. I mean, you name it. There's just so much stuff going into a holiday. It's going to be really hard to predict what is going on or what is going to happen next week. So looking at just the candles right now, take all what I said out, throw it out the window. Just looking at the technicals, slightly bearish. If we stay below 80, possibly going to continue lower. Stay below 6,000, possibly continue lower. But we'll see what happens. Taking a look at NASDAQ, the pullback was about 1.3%. From the high, we were down about 2%, but it did recover a decent chunk of that sell-off. You are using the prior highs as support, the 21,500 level. So it doesn't look terrible as of right now. If it does stay below that level, then it does look much worse. So we'll see how that plays out next week with all the things that we mentioned. But across the board, let's take a look at some of the other assets. The bond yields are up about 1.5%. The dollar is down slightly. The euro is pretty flat. Oil is down 3.4% because it was up so much yesterday. I think it was up like 13%. On the high. I can pull it up right here. It was up about 13% on the high, only up about 7% today. So it did pull back a little bit. Bitcoin is up 1.4%, and gold is decently flat. So taking a look at what kind of trades you could have taken today, it was a pretty messy day. It was pretty much just trading headlines the entire day. But if we were looking at, significant levels, there was one key trade that you could have taken today. And it was that failure to make it back inside yesterday's value. We tried to break back above 25. We tried to build value above that level, which I'll show the order flow here in a little bit. But we just could not hold above yesterday's value low. So because we could not hold that value retrace, you sold off for the rest of the day, which did lead back down to the value low of today, which was at the time around 59.70 to 59.80. So we finished a very significant rotation of today's value, and then we started to bounce off that value low and possibly rotate back to the value high. But obviously, the day was over, so we weren't able to see if it was going to play out. You kind of stalled around that POC node and possibly even failed to rotate heading lower into the next day, which would be Monday. Looking at NASDAQ, pretty much the same story. We pushed up pretty aggressively from the overnight. The open was pretty bullish. We were not able to build that value above yesterday's value low. So because we could not stay above that 866 level, you started pushing back down towards today's value low and finished that rotation to the downside. And same thing, we were not able to see if it was going to finish the rotation back to the value high, or was it stalling on the POC to be a failure to rotate and continue lower. Now let's take a look at the order flow and see how we could have traded this little pullback here. So starting off at 930, we tried to push up. It built a ton of value around that 07 level. Tried to break out from that node. Had too much sell pressure on that node. Ended up pulling back. So once you re-lost that node, which was around, right around, let me see here. What was that price level? 06? That was right around here. Once we re-lost that VWAP. Once you re-lost VWAP, re-lost the 24, you started heading back down into the session VWAP. And this is what I call the danger zone, where you're stuck between the daily VWAP and the session VWAP, and you're kind of just bouncing back and forth between those VWAPs. It's very choppy. You got to be careful. So once we started bouncing off the session VWAP, you hit the daily VWAP, and we talked about this on our morning stream. You started selling off that daily VWAP, but it didn't really have the seller delta to continue that bear flag into VWAP. Typically, that's a really good trade. We love to take bear flags into VWAP. But we did not see the consistent sell pressure on the delta side on that VWAP. So you started pushing down, but look at the delta. Very weak delta to the sell side. So when you see stuff like that, it's pretty likely, it's a high likelihood that it's going to push back. It's going to retest that level to see if there are actually sellers in that area. And there wasn't, right? We reclaimed VWAP. Look at the delta. The delta starts exploding. And then we go into a vertical distribution for most of the day. This is a vertical distribution until about 12:30. Oh yeah, in the meantime there was a single print trade. You created single prints on the way down, which was 87, and then you bounced beautifully to the tick. You protected that 30-minute low and bounced beautifully back into the single prints. We covered that pretty much tick by tick on the live stream, so be sure to check that out. But yeah, you had that little single print retrace. That was a possible trade if you guys like trading the single prints. And then after that, going all the way up to about 12:30, which was about right here, you were just in a vertical distribution, so you were trend following. You were trading the 24 EMA, trading the 8 EMA, following it all the way back up. And then around 12:30, we had this move right here. We had a large cluster of bullish delta get stuck on that 30-minute high. So we tried to break out into yesterday's value. So here's yesterday's value at 24. We tried to break out above 24 and hold above 24 to continue that rotation into 44 and 51. Continue the retrace, I should say. But what stalled that retrace was this bullish absorption here. You had a lot of bullish delta trading above 27, but it wasn't able to build a node above that bullish delta. The volume fell off rapidly, and then we turned into a 30-minute sweep. So once you reclaimed that 30-minute high at 28, or you reclaimed that node at 27, that turned into a bearish trade. And on the way back down, there were single prints. There were single prints going down to 22. So that was a pretty good target there. And if you didn't target the 22 single prints, you could have traded that rotation all the way back down. Now, one key thing to go back to here is you tried to get back above 24 for that final attempt. You tried to go back into yesterday's value. You could not hold above that 24 yet again. Look at the volume here. The volume falls off a cliff. Little bit of absorption at 25. So once you failed that retest right here, you can see it kind of pushed up, and then you failed back below that 24 EMA. And one clear sign that that is a failure is look at our delta. So same thing we saw when it retested VWAP. The delta on this push here is non-existent to the buy side. Very weak. It was pretty decent on NASDAQ, but it was very weak on ES. And the only place you did have delta was the high of the candle, which is not good in this case. Because if you have bullish delta on the high of the candle, and you're immediately going back below that, you can argue that delta is absorbed. It's trapped, right? So you trapped delta, you trapped price, back to VWAP. And then it was just headlines. This is when all the strikes started happening, and it was just headlines, 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 all the way back down. And basically for the rest of the day, if you were trading past like 1 o'clock to 1:30, you were just trading headlines. And that pullback went all the way back down, once again, back to this chart. It went all the way back down to the value low. And it started bouncing beautifully off the value low. You weren't finding any sell pressure below those levels. But all right, guys, that is it. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that recap. Hit that like button. Be sure to subscribe. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.